Today we're talking about transport vehicles in 9th edition, and why I think buying a ride for your troops is just a little bit better than it was in the previous edition. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel, where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we'll talk through transport vehicles, what they offer to infantry units, the positives and negatives of buying them compared with just getting more units in your army, and talk about a few transports for different factions that I think are particularly strong at the moment. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. I believe that transport vehicles generally offer you three different things in 40k. First of all, they give you increased mobility for the units they transport. Secondly, they make it a lot more durable by putting an armoured shell in between the enemy's bullets and your unit. And thirdly, they often have value as a unit in their own right. A tough unit that can tie up enemy units is helpful, and also they might have their own damage dealing potential. The mobility boost that some transports have tends to be quite obvious. Usually transport vehicles have a higher movement characteristic than the units that they're transporting, but it really does depend on the unit and transport in question as to how much of a big deal it's going to be. For example, if you were just looking at getting Imperial Guard infantry squads across the board, you might think that buying a Chimera or Taurox for them could get them there faster, but in general they will get there even faster if you just use the move order on them. Even for more basic things like Space Marine Rhinos transporting tactical marines, once you take advances into account, a lot of more basic ground-based transports don't actually tend to be all that much faster than the unit foot slogging themselves. Generally I feel that they're a bit better, but not necessarily a lot. Actual gains to mobility tend to be a little bit better if you're using something really fast, such as a flying transport, such as Harlequin Star Weavers or Drukhari Venoms. The mobility gain isn't exactly free as well. If you're foot slogging, then you can still shoot at the enemy, and it is quite helpful when transport vehicles have a rule that allow them to fire weapons while the unit's embarked within them, such as say with Orc battle wagons firing rockets out of them, or Harlequin Skyweavers that can have a troop inside them firing a whole load of fusion pistols. Even though mobility might be one of the obvious advantages, I think that actually having a durable shell in between your unit and the enemy is actually one of the best advantages of transport vehicles. A lot of the time you can justify them just for that, never mind any actual movement gain that you get out of it. Most transport vehicles tend to be quite lightly armed in terms of weapons, so tend to have a very good durability point for point. Say for example Space Marine Rhinos. They only cost 78 points, and you get 10 toughness 7 wounds on the table for that. There are very few vehicles out there that put quite so many wounds of vehicle on the table for quite so few points. A lot of transports also double down on this with other tricks, whether it's smoke launchers on Rhinos or Chimeras, reducing damage for Wave Serpents, -1 to hit for Venoms, or Necron Ghost Arc Quantum Shielding. Generally due to their light armament, transports tend to be some of the tougher units in the Codex. I think that durability is far more relevant in 9th edition, particularly with the way that objective scoring works now. If you're scoring primary objectives, then your opponent generally has a turn to try and shoot you off them before you get to score them, so swamping the objectives with a really good amount of durable units is a really good idea normally. An infantry squad in a transport vehicle is usually an excellent way to do this. As we said, the transports are already durable in their own right. The infantry squad within could be quite durable point for point as well, and actually the combination of the two can be even tougher than both individually. Say for example, if you have an Astra Militarum Chimera full of infantrymen parked on an objective, it can provide a bit more of a problem than just having the two units side by side. Basically your opponent will have to shoot at the vehicle first and then the infantry squad second, and it can kind of mess with their target priority. Say if they were taking aim at the formation with a Repulsor Executioner, which has got loads of anti-tank guns and anti-infantry guns, it'd only be able to efficiently use the anti-tank guns to start with, and all that anti-infantry firepower would have to either just shoot the Chimera or shoot something else. There's no way that it's going to be able to both target the Chimera and the infantry squad within it with both its anti-tank and anti-infantry weapons. It often means that the opponent might just choose to shoot something completely different, as it could be futile to try and clear the objective when it's got quite that much toughness on it. With their decent movement, it can be quite good for parking this sort of formation on a midfield objective. The other way that a really tough transport can be helpful is if your infantry squad is looking to deal some decent damage to the opponent and they're quite fragile to enemy return fire. Say for example Eldar Dark Reapers, they quite like to hide in Wave Serpents, as they're very expensive toughness 3 infantry, and they really don't want to be shot turn 1. By hiding in a Wave Serpent, you can at least guarantee that they'll get one good turn of damage dealing in, then even potentially use some Eldar Trickery to get straight back into the transport again. I think having transport vehicles for this purpose is really good against Ignore's line of sight weapons. Say for example if the enemy had a Thunderfire cannon, then it could pretty much reach the Reapers wherever they are on the table. If you were just against more direct line of sight weapons, they might be able to just hide out of line of sight behind obscuring terrain, but that's not going to work against Ignore's line of sight weaponry. loitering inside a transport vehicle can be one way of sort of keeping them off the table to pretty much guarantee them the first strike unless the opponent makes the effort to chew through the durable transport. People also use this sort of thing with more assault type units, say having a rhino tank rumbling forward to be a bit of a battlefield bunker for some really dangerous melee troops such as Sisters Repentia or Khorne Berserkers. You can use the good movement to get them in position where they'll be able to get a charge the next turn, then your opponent has the choice of either chewing through both the transport vehicle and then the unit within them, or just ignoring the whole thing and allowing you to get out and hopefully make an optimal charge. In general, I think that this is going to work out better most of the time compared with just footslogging these assault specialists up the board, as otherwise they're just going to get gunned down for not really all that much effort on the opponent's part. Finally, transports can also use their inherent toughness even after the troops have disembarked. They might be able to score objectives in their own right, screen your units in terms of deep strike, tanking Overwatch for more fragile troops, or even just charging them directly into enemy units to make them have to fight them and tie them up. Having an annoying, low-cost, tough unit in the midfield can be really annoying for an opponent. Finally, plenty of transports have their own weapons in their own right and can be quite dangerous in terms of damage output. Most transports tend to only have limited damage output, but if you have at least some, then it could kind of help you justify a transport that either isn't all that fast or isn't all that tough. Provided they've got some decent weapons as well, they could still contribute to the battle in other ways. There's plenty of vehicles with transport capacity that can just be fielded in their own right, where you don't really need to use them as transports if you don't want to. One good example might be the Repulsor Executioner. It does have a transport capacity, but you mainly take it for the big guns rather than anything else. It can still be just pretty helpful to use it as sort of an incidental transport. Say for example, if you had an elite infantry squad that wanted to be kept safe from Ignore's line of sight shooting turn 1, then they could potentially just start in the tank's hold and keep them safe from that, all ready to move out and do a good turn's damage dealing. There's a couple of transports that give you different deployment options, including but not limited to the Terrax drill or the drop pod. You more tend to buy them just for being able to deep strike, then the unit can get out and unleash its weapons on the opponent. And you can also use transport vehicles to get more out of redeployment or pre-game move options, such as say the Necron Ghost Arc, which can be redeployed via the Catan Shard of the Deceiver. If you put that and a bunch of Necron warriors in the opponent's face, then it's going to be causing problems. The Adeptus Mechanicus often like to use their Stygies Dune Riders to transport their Electro Priests into combat, and Stygies has a pre-game stratagem for 1 CP that allow you to move before the game starts, so you can zoom that Dune Rider forward, then in your turn 1 they can get out and make a first turn charge hopefully. In general, I'd recommend weighing up taking transport vehicles against taking more infantry units of the same type. For example, do you really want a guard squad in a Chimera tank, or do you want 3 guard squads for example? Sometimes the transport vehicle can justify its existence, but a lot of the time it might just be better with more warm bodies. Many transport vehicles can cost a lot more than their passengers, which does sound counterintuitive, but sometimes it can be helpful, particularly if the main purpose of the unit is to be very tough and to hold objectives. So here's a bit of a list of some of the transports that are seeing most play at the moment. I'm not saying this is any sort of complete list, there are plenty of other decent options, but I just wanted to talk through a few of them. Space Marine Impulsors went up in points cost in 9th and are very much a premium transport option, but have some really helpful special rules, being able to move very fast and also get out and allow the Marine unit to shoot as soon as they've disembarked. They're very solid with delivering intercessors up the board, particularly either assault intercessors or regular intercessor squads with Thunderhammer Sergeants. The Repulsor and Repulsor Executioner and Razorbacks are fairly decent damage dealers in their own right, so can be helpful as incidental transports, and drop pods are really decent for delivering damage dealers, particularly things like Grav Devastator squads. For Adeptus Mechanicus, Dune Riders full of Vanguard or Fulgurite Electro Priests see quite common play, and occasionally the Terrax Drill for delivering squads of Vanguard or either flavour of Electro Priest. For Sisters of Battle, Rhinos full of Repentia are very dangerous and a really strong combo together. I strongly consider Rhinos if ever running Repentia, and it's going to be interesting to see if the Immolator makes a bit more of a comeback. Now basically all its weapon versions are going to be buffed, including having 2-shot multi-melters. For Guard at the moment, I'd say that Chimeras are pretty much the way to go. I did an entire video the other week talking about Chimeras with double heavy flamers and how they're a fairly decent battle line unit, really capitalising on being annoying to remove and also have some decent damage dealing even if they're locked up in close. On the Chaos side of things, Khorne Berserkers and Rhinos are generally not a bad shout, though I suspect that they could be far stronger when they get 2 wounds. I've seen people use Plague Marines in Rhinos as a good way to help deliver a bombardment of blight grenades, and many Chaos forces can make use of the excellent Terrax drill as well, allowing them to deep strike and then having a tough annoying threat in the drill itself to tie up or damage enemy armour. For Xenos armies, I'm generally a bigger fan of battle wagons over trucks for the orcs. Particularly a battle wagon with the fortress upgrade is very nice, and can be either a decent delivery system for melee troops, or potentially having a whole load of tank busters chilling out in it, firing off rockets towards enemy armour. Necron Ghost Arcs are very solid, particularly with that quantum shielding, and can have some movement shenanigans with the Deceiver as we mentioned. Harlequin Starweavers and Drakari Baiters and Venoms can be good for getting their infantry units to where they need to go, and are both kind of mandatory for a lot of their troop and infantry choices just because they're so incredibly fragile and needing to get towards the enemy as fast as possible. Finally, Craftworld Eldar Wave Serpents remain decent too. Very obnoxious to take out with that -1 damage rule that they have, and can be a helpful place to hide either Dark Reapers or Dire Avengers, to keep them safe until they're disembarking to deal damage or to maybe secure some objectives. Finally, one other option in 9th edition that can avoid the need for transports is using strategic reserves. If you want a fragile unit to get close to the enemy, then that's another pretty excellent way. I wouldn't necessarily go too heavy on strategic reserves, just because your opponent might be able to screen out a lot of the board edges if they've got a big board control army. But say for example you could stick a unit of Sisters Repentia or Khorne Berserkers in reserve and attempt to charge out of Deep Strike, maybe with some CPV rolls, stratagems or miracle dice thrown in to have a bit more reliability on the charge. So I hope you've enjoyed a short discussion on transport vehicles in 9th edition. Let me know your thoughts about any transports that have been working well in your army down in the comments below. As always, it'll be good to have a read over them. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly have plenty more 40k content coming out on the channel. And if you are enjoying my videos a lot recently, then any support on the channel's Patreon page is massively appreciated. It is what allows me to keep on making these videos quite so regularly, so if you want to help keep them coming, then the link is down in the video description. Channel patrons get to see one video early each week. There's regular votes and polls to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and you also get automatically entered into the Auspex Tactics prize giveaway with a chance to win some very big kits each month. If any of that sounds good, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.